When billionaire CEO Victoria Steele loses everything in one devastating day, a chance encounter with humble mechanic Owen Rivers changes her life forever. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. A powerful story of redemption, love, and finding purpose in life's darkest moments. The day everything fell apart. The morning had started like any other Tuesday for Victoria Steele. Her alarm chimed at exactly 5:30, the same melodic tone that had woken her every weekday for the past 8 years. She slipped into her charcoal gray Armani suit, the fabric crisp and perfect, armor for another day of corporate warfare. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse showed a woman who had conquered every obstacle life had thrown her way. By 7, she was in her Tesla Model S, speeding toward the gleaming tower that housed Steele Innovations, the tech company she had built from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. The morning news played softly through the premium sound system, but Victoria barely listened. Her mind was already 3 meetings ahead, calculating market projections and rehearsing her presentation for the board. The first sign of trouble came at 9:15. Her assistant, Janet, appeared in her office doorway with an expression Victoria had never seen before. The color had drained from Janet's usually rosy cheeks, and her hands trembled slightly as she held a tablet. "Victoria, you need to see this," Janet whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. The tablet displayed a news article that made Victoria's blood run cold. Steele Innovations under federal investigation, allegations of data manipulation, rock tech giant. The words seemed to blur together as Victoria read about accusations she had never heard before, contracts she had never seen, and evidence that painted her as the mastermind behind a massive fraud scheme. Phone began buzzing incessantly. First the board members, their voices tight with panic and accusation. Then the investors, demanding explanations she couldn't provide. The stock price plummeted in real time as she watched, each refresh of the screen showing another devastating drop. By noon, the media had gathered outside the building like vultures. Camera crews and reporters pressed against the glass lobby, their questions echoing through the marble halls. "Ms. Steele, how do you respond to these allegations? Will you be stepping down? What about your daughter's trust fund?" The mention of Chloe hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her 8-year-old daughter was at school, blissfully unaware that their world was crumbling. Victoria thought of the custody arrangement with her ex-husband's family, how they had always disapproved of her career focus. This scandal would give them exactly the ammunition they needed. The emergency board meeting at 2 o'clock was her execution, disguised as a discussion. The men and women who had praised her vision just weeks before now sat around the polished conference table like judges at a trial. Their faces were stone masks of disapproval and legal caution. "We have no choice but to ask for your immediate resignation," announced board chairman Robert Henley, his words delivered with the warmth of a corporate press release. "The company's reputation must be protected." Victoria opened her mouth to defend herself, to explain that she knew nothing about the alleged crimes, but the words died in her throat. She could see in their eyes that guilt or innocence no longer mattered. She had become a liability, a problem to be solved with surgical precision. The rain started as she cleaned out her office. Fat droplets splattered against the windows, distorting her view of the city she had once conquered. Her personal items fit into a single cardboard box, a photo of Chloe, a small potted orchid, and the crystal paperweight her father had given her when she landed her first job. The parking garage felt like a tomb as Victoria walked toward her car. Each footstep echoed off the concrete walls, a hollow sound that seemed to mock her former confidence. She placed the box in the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, her hands shaking as she tried to process the day's events. The drive to pick up Chloe became a nightmare of mechanical failure. The Tesla's dashboard lit up with warning lights as Victoria navigated through increasingly heavy rain. The car lurched and stuttered, its advanced systems failing one by one. Steam began rising from under the hood, and the engine made a grinding sound that spoke of expensive repairs Victoria could no longer afford. She managed to pull over on a quiet street just as the engine gave its final shudder and died. The rain drummed against the roof like an accusation, and Victoria finally allowed herself to cry. The tears came in great, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built, had vanished in a single day. Chloe's voice from the back seat cut through her despair. "Mummy, why are we stopped? Are you okay?" Victoria wiped her eyes and turned to look at her daughter. Chloe sat in her booster seat, her school uniform slightly wrinkled, her dark hair escaping from its morning ponytail. She held her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, and her brown eyes were wide with concern. "The car is just tired, sweetheart," Victoria managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "We might need some help." The street was nearly empty, lined with small businesses that looked closed for the day. Victoria fumbled for her phone, but the screen showed no signal. The rain seemed to be getting heavier, turning the world outside into a gray blur of uncertainty. That was when she saw the small auto repair shop across the street, its neon sign flickering bravely against the storm. Rivers Auto Repair, it read in simple blue letters. Light spilled from the open bay doors, warm and welcoming against the harsh afternoon. Victoria gathered her courage and stepped out into the rain. Finding light in darkness, the rain soaked through Victoria's expensive suit within seconds, the fabric clinging to her skin as she hurried across the empty streets. Her heels clicked against the wet asphalt, each step a reminder of how unprepared she was for this moment. Behind her, Chloe pressed her face against the car window, watching her mother with the patient trust that only children possess. The auto shop smelled of motor oil and honest work, a sharp contrast to the sterile corporate environment Victoria had left behind just hours ago. Tool-lined walls and the steady hum of machinery created an atmosphere of competence and reliability. A tall man emerged from beneath the hood of an old pickup truck, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. Owen Rivers looked nothing like the executives Victoria was used to dealing with. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his blue work shirt bore the honest stains of a day spent fixing things that mattered. When he looked up and saw her standing in his doorway, dripping and desperate, his expression shifted from surprise to immediate concern. "Ma'am, you look like you could use some help," he said, his voice carrying the kind of warmth that Victoria had forgotten existed in the world. There was no judgment in his tone, no calculation about what she might be worth to him. Victoria tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. The events of the day crashed over her again like a wave, and she found herself fighting back tears. "My car," she managed finally. "It just died across the street. My daughter is in there, and I don't know what to do." Owen didn't hesitate. He grabbed a yellow rain slicker from a hook near the door and headed out into the storm without another word. Victoria watched through the rain-streaked window as he approached her Tesla, his movements confident and purposeful. He knocked gently on the passenger window, and Chloe rolled it down just enough to peek out. "Hi there," Owen said, crouching down to Chloe's eye level. "I'm Owen. Your mum asked me to take a look at your car. Would that be okay with you?" Chloe nodded solemnly, clutching Mr. Peanuts tighter. "Are you going to fix it?" "I'm going to try my best," Owen replied with a smile that reached his eyes. "Can you and Mr. Peanuts wait here while I check under the hood?" 20 minutes later, Owen returned to the shop where Victoria waited, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. His expression was gentle but honest. "The cooling system failed completely," he explained. "It's going to need major work. Probably a few days in the shop." Victoria felt the last of her composure crumble. "I can't afford it," she whispered, the admission cutting deep. "I lost my job today. I lost everything today." Owen studied her face for a moment, seeing past the expensive clothes to the human being underneath. "Tell you what," he said finally. "Why don't you and your daughter come inside where it's warm? We can figure out the details later." The next hour passed in a blur of simple kindness. Owen made hot chocolate for Chloe, who had taken an immediate liking to him and his patient way of answering her endless questions about cars and tools. He found a dry shop shirt for Victoria to change into, and when she protested about the cost of repairs, he simply shook his head. "Sometimes people just need help," Owen said as he watched Chloe carefully examine a harmless wrench. "Doesn't always have to be about money." As the days passed, Victoria found herself returning to the shop even after her car was fixed. At first, she told herself it was to pay Owen back in installments, but the truth was more complicated. The chaos of her legal troubles and the media attention made her apartment feel like a prison, but the shop felt safe. Owen never asked intrusive questions about her situation, never made her feel like a charity case. Chloe had claimed Owen as her unofficial uncle, delighting in his patient explanations of how engines worked, and his willingness to let her help with simple tasks. Victoria watched her daughter bloom under Owen's attention, seeing a side of Chloe she had missed during all those late nights at the office. "You're good with her," Victoria said one evening as they watched Chloe carefully sort bolts by size, her tongue poking out in concentration. Owen glanced up from the carburetor he was rebuilding. "She's a smart kid, just needs someone to listen." The words stung because Victoria knew they were true. How many school plays had she missed? How many Bedtime stories had been cut short by urgent phone calls. She had been so focused on building a future for Chloe that she had forgotten to be present for her childhood. The custody battle began 3 weeks after Victoria's professional downfall. Her ex-husband's parents, the Ashfords, filed papers claiming that Victoria's scandal and financial instability made her unfit to care for Chloe. The legal documents arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a stern-faced courier who seemed to take satisfaction in her shocked reaction. Victoria sat in her lawyer's office the next day, listening to explanations about custody laws and character witnesses while panic built in her chest. The Ashfords had money, influence, and a spotless reputation. They painted themselves as the stable choice, the safe harbor in the storm of Victoria's disgrace. "We need character references," her lawyer explained. "People who can speak to your parenting abilities and your relationship with Chloe." Victoria's mind went blank. Her work colleagues had scattered like leaves in the wind when the scandal broke. Old friends had stopped returning her calls. The isolation of her former success had left her with precious few allies. That evening, she found herself at Owen's shop again, watching him work while Chloe dozed in a chair nearby, exhausted from a day of helping. The familiar sounds of the garage soothed her frayed nerves, and she found herself telling Owen about the custody battle. "They're saying I'm an unfit mother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe they're right. Maybe Chloe would be better off with them." Owen set down his wrench and looked at her directly. "Is that what you really believe?" Victoria thought about the question seriously. She remembered Chloe's laughter when they built pillow forts on Sunday mornings, the way her daughter curled up next to her during thunderstorms, the proud smile on Chloe's face when Victoria attended her first parent-teacher conference in months. "No," she said finally, "I love her more than anything. I just don't know if love is enough anymore." "Love is everything," Owen replied simply. "Everything else can be learned." The next morning, Owen appeared at Victoria's apartment with a thermos of coffee and a determined expression. "I want to testify as a character witness," he announced. "If you'll have me." Victoria stared at him in amazement. "Owen, you barely know me. This could hurt your business if people think you're associated with me." He shrugged. "I know enough. I've watched you with Chloe every day for weeks. I've seen how much you love her, how hard you're trying to put your life back together. That's worth fighting for." As they prepared for the custody hearing, Victoria realized that Owen had become more than just a helpful neighbor. He had become a friend when she needed one most, a steady presence in the chaos of her unraveling life. His belief in her worth had helped her begin to believe in herself again. The night before the hearing, Victoria tucked Chloe into bed with extra care, reading 3 stories instead of 1. As she turned off the light, Chloe's sleepy voice stopped her at the door. "Mummy, are you going to go away?" Victoria's heart clenched. "Never, baby. I'm going to fight to stay with you always." "Good," Chloe murmured, already drifting off. "Like it when we're together, and I like Owen too. It makes you smile again." Standing in the doorway of her daughter's room, Victoria realized that Chloe was right. For the first time in months, she had reasons to smile. Whatever tomorrow brought, she wouldn't face it alone. New beginnings. The courthouse felt like a cathedral of judgment, its marble floors echoing with the footsteps of families torn apart and put back together by legal decree. Victoria sat in the hard wooden pew behind her lawyer's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. Across the aisle, the Ashfords sat with their expensive legal team, their faces masks of righteous certainty. Judge Patricia Holloway entered the courtroom with the quiet authority of someone who had seen every kind of family drama imaginable. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, and her dark eyes seemed to see straight through to the truth of things. Victoria felt exposed under that gaze, as if all her failures and fears were written across her forehead. The Ashfords' lawyer spoke, first, painting a picture of Victoria as a negligent mother consumed by corporate ambition. He cited her long work hours, the scandal that had destroyed her company, and her current financial instability. Each word felt like a blow, especially because so much of it was true. "Your Honor," the lawyer concluded, "the minor child deserves stability, security, and the kind of moral guidance that only comes from a spotless reputation. My clients can provide all of these things." When it was time for Victoria's defense, her lawyer called Owen to the witness stand. Victoria watched him walk to the front of the courtroom, his movements steady and sure even in this unfamiliar environment. He wore his one good suit, navy blue and slightly worn at the cuffs, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. "State your name and occupation for the record," Victoria's lawyer began. Owen Rivers. I own and operate Rivers Auto Repair. How do you know the defendant? Victoria Steele. Owen's eyes found Victoria's across the courtroom. She came to my shop about 2 months ago when her car broke down in the rain. She was having the worst day of her life, but all she cared about was making sure her daughter was safe and warm. Can you describe your observations of Ms. Steele's relationship with her daughter? Owen leaned forward slightly, his voice gaining strength. I've never seen a mother love a child more completely. Victoria might have made mistakes in her business life, but with Chloe, she's perfect. She listens when Chloe talks about her day. She knows all her favorite books, her fears, her dreams. When Chloe scraped her knee at my shop, Victoria held her and sang to her until the tears stopped. The Ashfords' lawyer tried to shake Owen's testimony, suggesting that his observations were limited and biased. But Owen remained steady, his answers simple and honest. When asked about Victoria's character, he said something that made Victoria's eyes fill with tears. Your Honor, I've fixed a lot of broken things in my life. Cars, motorcycles, relationships. I know the difference between something that's truly damaged and something that just needs the right care to run properly again. Victoria Steele isn't broken, she's just been through a storm, and storms pass. When Chloe was called to speak with the judge privately, Victoria felt her heart stop. Everything depended on this conversation, on what her 8-year-old daughter would say about their life together. The minutes stretched like hours as Judge Holloway and Chloe disappeared into chambers. They emerged 20 minutes later, Chloe running straight to Victoria's arms. Judge Holloway returned to her bench with an expression that revealed nothing. This court has heard testimony about stability, about financial security, about moral character, the judge began. These are all important considerations in a custody case. However, this court has also heard something equally important: evidence of a genuine, loving relationship between a mother and her child. Victoria held her breath. The minor child has expressed clearly and consistently her desire to remain with her mother. She speaks of their traditions together, their inside jokes, their bedtime stories. She talks about feeling safe and loved. While Mr. and Mrs. Ashford can certainly provide material advantages, this court finds that the emotional bond between Victoria Steele and her daughter is strong and healthy. Judge Holloway's gavel came down with finality. Custody remains with the mother. Case dismissed. Victoria sank into her chair, overwhelmed with relief. Chloe threw her arms around her neck, and for a moment, the courtroom faded away. They were staying together. Outside the courthouse, Owen waited by his truck, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. When he saw them emerge, his face lit up with a smile that rivaled the afternoon sun. We did it, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. Owen, I can never thank you enough for what you did in there. He shrugged, embarrassed by her gratitude, just told the truth. That evening, Victoria made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She called a meeting with her legal team and announced that she was dropping her efforts to rebuild Steele Innovations. Instead, she wanted to start something completely different. I want to open a small business, she explained. To her bewildered lawyers, something that actually helps people. The idea had been growing in her mind for weeks as she watched Owen work. There was something honest about fixing things, about taking something broken and making it whole again. She had spent years building a tech empire that ultimately meant nothing, but Owen spent his days solving real problems for real people. 6 months later, Victoria stood in front of a modest storefront on the same street as Owen's garage. The sign above the door read Second Chances, Auto and Life Coaching in simple blue letters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. The business was exactly what the name suggested, a combination auto repair shop and life coaching service. Victoria had used her business skills to help Owen expand his operation while he taught her everything about fixing cars. They discovered that many of their customers needed more than just mechanical repairs. They needed someone to listen, someone to help them figure out their next steps. It's not about the money, Victoria explained to a reporter from the local newspaper who had come to do a feature on her dramatic career change. For the first time in my adult life, I'm doing work that actually matters. The reporter seemed puzzled by this sentiment, but Victoria didn't mind. Not everyone would understand why she had traded a corner office for coveralls, why she preferred the smell of motor oil to the scent of leather conference rooms. On a warm Saturday morning, in spring, Victoria found herself lying under a pickup truck, teaching Chloe how to change oil. Her daughter had proven surprisingly adept at mechanical work, her small fingers perfect for reaching tight spaces. Mummy, is this what you always wanted to do? Chloe asked, as she carefully positioned the drain pan. Victoria considered the question. Seriously, a year ago she would have laughed at the idea of working in a garage, but now, with her hands dirty and her daughter beside her, she felt more content than she ever had in a boardroom. You know what, baby? I think this is exactly what I was meant to do. I just took the long way around to figure it out. Owen appeared beside the truck, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. How are my favorite mechanics doing? We're learning, Victoria said, sliding out from under the vehicle. She accepted the coffee gratefully, noting how natural it felt to work beside him, how easily they had fallen into partnership. That evening, after Chloe had gone to bed, Victoria and Owen sat on the small porch behind the shop, watching the sun set over their little corner of the world. The day's work was done, their customers helped, their bills paid. It wasn't wealth in the traditional sense, but Victoria had never felt richer. Do you ever miss it? Owen asked quietly. The corporate world, the power, all of that. Victoria thought about his question, really considered it. She remembered the rush of closing a big deal, the satisfaction of seeing stock prices rise, the respect that came with success. But she also remembered the isolation, the constant pressure, where ambition had slowly eaten away at everything that mattered. I miss the security, she admitted, but I don't miss feeling empty at the end of every day. I don't miss being too busy to notice my daughter growing up. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the evening air soft around them. Finally, Victoria spoke again. Owen, what you said in court that day, about storms passing, you were right. But sometimes when the storm passes, you realize you're in a completely different place than where you started. And sometimes that's exactly where you were supposed to be all along. He smiled and reached for her hand. Sometimes the best destinations are the ones you never planned to visit. As the stars began to appear overhead, Victoria realized that losing everything had been the beginning of finding herself. The crying CEO who had broken down in the rain was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that success wasn't measured in stock prices or board positions, but in the quiet satisfaction of work well done and love freely given. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new problems to solve, new lives to touch. And Victoria Steele, former corporate titan, turned small-town mechanic, couldn't wait to see what challenges the day would bring.